This episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast is brought to you in part by No Judges Needed BJJ Apparel and Lavender Lane CBD products. You can use the promo code JJT for 20% off your first order at No Judges Needed, and the code JJTimes20, all uppercase. Last two items are numerical for 20% off your first order of CBD products. Thank you very much for sticking with us. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. I am your host, Kevin Bradley, joined as always by my co-host, Mr. Kevin Gallagher. And today we have a very special and thoughtful episode. Veteran care is an often overlooked cause in today's society. Soldiers return home from combat with needs that are going unmet at alarming rates. Today, we are joined by behavioral scientist Dr. Gino Collura and VP of the We Defy Foundation, TJ Kreutzer, to talk about the role Jiu-Jitsu might play in lightening their load. Gents, welcome onto the show. How we doing?
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
All
I
right.
really appreciate the opportunity and this conversation, man. It's going to be good stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm excited myself about this one, guys. I really
Yeah, Gino, like if in case it gets cut, I'm still mad at you for your haircut. So like don't smile so much.
No worries, man. I get it. It's a good reason to be pissed. It's cool.
Your mug's nicer than mine too. Shit. I'm not even gonna bring it up. All right. Well, just to this is the first round table type show we've ever done. So we're just gonna take it over to TJ real quick. TJ, if you could sort of outline your connection to the military and jiu-jitsu and the We Defy Foundation for us, just so our viewers get a better idea of who we're speaking with.
Okay, well, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and then kind of had a dream of flying a fighter ever since I saw the trench run in Star Wars as a little kid. And I was lucky that I grew up in a supportive environment that prepared me well for success in life, and eventually got to go to the Air Force Academy, graduated from there, went to pilot training to a NATO program built to produce fighter pilots, and graduated from that, flew the F-16 in a couple different places, flew in Korea, flew in Iraq, and eventually became an instructor pilot and joined the Air Force Reserves and finished out my time, got a 20-year reserve retirement out of it. And then towards the last couple of years of my Air Force time, I started to get into jiu-jitsu, and I have a psychology degree from the Air Force Academy as well. And what I started to see was that there was a pairing between veterans and this activity. I think it had a lot to do with just the warrior ethos that exists in it as an attraction to it. But there's so many other components to it that fit the warrior psyche and the warrior ethos. And I was in a gym in Chicago, Redsvik, downtown Loop gym, just training on a drop-in. I met a vet in the back, or in the locker room afterwards. And we started talking about his challenges and integrating back to civilian life after service. And we talked for about an hour, and we covered a lot of subjects that I'm interested in, like PTSD and trauma therapy and moral injury, and a lot of other concepts that I've stayed up with this psychology degree and a background, at least with an academic interest in current issues. And at the end of that talk, he said, the way you framed some of this stuff for me was really good, and it was a way that I haven't seen it framed before, and I think you should think about helping people. And that put a bug in me to look for something, maybe through the VA or something else where I could help veterans, because veterans commonly have challenges on all kinds of different levels when they leave the service. And I know very few that couldn't use some sort of outlet at some point. And then I found out about We Defy Foundation at a seminar in Minnesota where they were the beneficiaries of the fundraising. And Mission 22 was there, and We Defy was there. And I looked at both organizations, and I asked about ambassador programs in both. But We Defy really spoke to me because it was the one that was focused on jiu-jitsu. And that's what I wanted to do. And that's how I got involved. The We Defy Foundation sponsors veterans to train jiu-jitsu for a year as a way to help cope with their service-connected disabilities. I think it's a lot the community that helps with that, and then it's the activity itself. So there's a bunch of different components that make jiu-jitsu great. But We Defy tries to bring people that are on the outside, that are challenged, that are trying to find a way to integrate back into society, and we provide a method to do that through the sport.
Well, I can't think of a more organic way to transition to our other guest, Dr. Gino. You've specifically done a lot of work in that field. If you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you got turned on to studying this issue, and the incredible study that you did on, PTSD and jiu-jitsu as a specific activity. Just take it from there, if you could.
Yeah, right on, man. So, to kind of echo the sentiment that TJ kicked off, there's something inherently unique and special about jiu-jitsu and grappling in general. So my own personal story, kind of getting to where it is that I am today. So as Kevin had mentioned earlier, when I first kind of got exposed to the combative arts, specifically Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, I fell in love with it, right? I was probably 18, 19 years old. A gentleman by the name of Rob Kahn had just came down from New York, opened up shop. Kevin,
Yeah.
Opened up shop at Frank Calta's gym. And, at the time I was boxing, young, full of piss and vinegar, right? So I'm like, what's this jiu-jitsu stuff, man? I don't know what this is all about. And so Rob's super nice guy. He's like, why don't you come try a class? And I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, I'm going to rock him. I'm going to be great. Dude, he tapped me like 10 times in the first minute, right? Just an incredibly humbling experience. So I have had a profound respect for the art and obviously started training. Fast forward about 2 years later, I got involved with the executive protection industry. And so that led me down to moving to Colombia, South America, specifically Cartagena, which is a beautiful city, but like anything else in a third world country, it's got its ups and it's got its downs, right? So had an opportunity to work closely with a unit they call La Jungla. So La Jungla is a specific sector that really focuses in on operating at a very fast operational tempo, and they do a lot of narcotraficante type operations, right? So I got exposed to what PTSD is, right? So the idea of there being trauma and there's some sort of stress that we are feeling, right? Or what we call allostatic load in the research world, which I'll talk about that later. But it kind of takes us off our bearings and it feels like something's not right. We're not blending in. We're not normal, right? Hence why it's a disorder. The thing about Colombia that's really unique and that I learned there is that, these cats that I was surrounded with, religion was a big deal. Belief in something bigger, belief in something deeper than just the mission itself, right? They were doing what they were doing for a reason. That went beyond just orders. That held a lot of significance and salience in their hearts and in their minds. So whenever they would begin to feel the symptomology associated with what we would consider here in the States, PTSD, for them, they called it demonios de guerra, right? Which basically means demons of war. And they would go to church, right? And they would go into confession. And for many of them, that worked, right? It helped to subside a lot of the symptoms that they were feeling. That fascinated me, right? So looking at how PTSD is dealt with here in the States, with the diagnostics and statistics manual that we have, the medications that get pushed out to a lot of vets and first responders for that matter as well, there's a huge contrast. There's a really, really big difference between the deeper significance and meaning from a religious perspective, which has a lot of tentacles of association with identity. How do I identify myself in this particular time with this particular set of circumstances that has trauma all over? So came back to the States after that stint of working down there and started my PhD at USF in a discipline called neuroanthropology. So that's neuroscience mixed with cultural medical anthropology.
I always get amazed when you say that because my mind, the literary side of my mind, tries to piece those two words together and come up with such a specific skill set as what that entails.
I got it. No, Kevin's really thinking, oh man, there's so many ways I could get that term wrong.
Yeah, right. Kevin, tell me what that means real quick. Go ahead, Gino.
No, it's cool, man. So, came back here, started doing some work and some internships with the VA, and really had a chance to understand the clinicalization of PTSD as we know it, and really got exposed to what it means to go through the process and the protocols that were set forth by the VA. And United with me at the time, I had picked up Jiu-Jitsu again, yeah, I knew with some of my own demons, right? It was helping me. Like, I'll give you guys some personal insight. When I was a child, 3rd grade, my aunt was shot in the face in front of me, right? And so my parents, as a result, got me into martial arts, right, to try and help from a coping perspective. I never connected those dots because I was so young. As I got older and I came back to the States, and I saw what the difference was as far as jiu-jitsu made in my life, right? It was a big deal, right? And I didn't have anywhere near the experience that a lot of these veterans have and had. So I knew that there was something there and I wanted to understand it more. So I spent, about 4 or 5 years really entrenched in literature review, study review, interviews with practitioners, psychiatrists, psychologists, sociologists, to understand the overarching sentiment of where are some of the cracks in the foundation. We have so many folks that go to the VA seeking treatment, but more importantly, we have a ton who don't, right? And those numbers are very significant because I think it's to the tune of about 70% of vets who commit suicide never went to the VA for treatment in the first place, right? And so there's a gap, like there's a problem, right, that we have to address. And so clearly the white coat effect, right, meaning going to a doctor, someone you don't know, you can't relate to, you haven't ever shared any sort of combative camaraderie with that person. I'm supposed to spill on my guts, right, and have this conversation with you when you can't relate. Like, that's tough, man, especially when you're coming from a brotherhood and a camaraderie that is forged in blood and sweat and tears, like legitimately. So I knew something was off. So I did a retrospective analysis as well for many different cultures, combative cultures, to understand the deeper essence, the deeper meaning of what was going on, what it means for one human being to take another life, what it means for one human being to lose a life, as in a brother, right, or a sister that they were very, very close with, and the trauma associated and experienced with it. And also how important social capital is. When I say social capital, just meaning the people around you, having a good bank of folks that you can trust, that you can build memories with, that you can rely on. And brother, I mean, I think you guys can all relate, like, here in the civilian world, especially in the corporate world, right, you don't see camaraderie like that. You don't see the bonds and the trust. It's a tap dance. Everyone's kind of just tap dancing to do what they got to do to get the paycheck, to get to the next level. There is no deeper binding element that perpetuates and pushes them forward. So I knew I wanted to do something to highlight that, because I felt personally that was a missing component in the treatment protocol for vets. Not, did it mean that jiu-jitsu was for everybody? No, of course not, right? But there's a myriad of things that people can do. Do I think it's one that's extremely salient? Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, in a really big way. So that is what kicked off my study. And my gosh, man, today actually it's 5 years since I completed that study, believe it or not.
I remember when you were coming around gym to gym doing your case
That's
study.
right.
Different gym. Yeah. Before any of this was even on the board, I remember
Yeah.
you came up and asked me some questions about that.
That's
so
exactly right.
I've got a few follow-up questions to that, because I interviewed you previously for an article I wrote for the Jiu-Jitsu Times, and I remember it was one of the most enlightening conversations I've had on the topic of PTSD in a long, long time, because it's things that I myself understand. You know what I'm talking about? But I don't really understand the scientific premises of why the connections are made and why these things are relatable and why the effects are shown to the sufferers of PTSD. I get the camaraderie, I get all the other things, but hearing someone from an actual scientific perspective, it's actually done a case study on the topic, it's enlightening to me, because now it helps my understanding of it more and more. So can you talk briefly about, you talked about the Lahonga and the members of that paramilitary group going to church and going to confession for their relief. Can you talk about some of the similarities that you see between jiu-jitsu and that same kind of religious experience?
Yeah. So let's start with ritual, right? The ritualistic nature of jiu-jitsu itself, right? The tapping, the rolling, the fist bumps, all that kind of stuff. The ritualistic nature with other human beings has a lot of value, right? Because it's something that we can expect. It's not an unknown. We know our brain doesn't like ambiguity. It doesn't like that state of confusion. So to know what to expect, B, to do what you're expecting with folks who you trust. That's a really big thing in a world, especially nowadays, where social media reigns. Everyone has a pseudo life, right, that they're putting out there. To be able to be raw with someone, to be able to be naked, right, so to speak, with other people, that's an incredibly powerful thing. So if you think about the religious experience, when you're at your most vulnerable state and you are in confession and you are saying, I did this, I feel like this, God, please help me. Please give me that power, give me that insight, right? Though, yeah, we can make the argument that it's not actually religion that jiu-jitsu is, but we could also make the argument that, yeah, it is. We
Right.
get easily that jiu-jitsu is religion, right? And so it's the idea of having something, being bound to something much greater than ourselves. When we are training, we are literally sacrificing ourselves for each other, right? It's not just, yeah, there is a selfish component that we want to get better in our game, but I'm also giving up my elbow for the armbar. I'm giving up my neck for the choke, the knee bar, whatever it is. And in a split second, someone who doesn't know any better, they could cause some very serious damage. So the trust that is there is not one that you would find in other places. It's very similar to what you would find in a religious context.
Do you find, obviously, in terms of
real quick, I just wanted to. I thought that was a good place to kick it over to TJ. Just
Sure.
that aspect of trust. TJ, flying for as long as you have, trust is an incredibly important aspect of being in the service in all branches. How did it feel learning to trust people in combative situations outside of the military, just like in the gym?
I think that's a really key point to why this program works so well with reintegration, because a lot of soldiers come back with a trust deficit, where they gained so much trust with the people in their immediate surroundings, the people they're deployed with. But then you're in that environment and you don't know who the enemy is a lot. You could see kids on the street that are throwing rocks at you with razor blades attached to them and all kinds of terrible things. You don't know who to trust. The moral system of survival in a combat scenario is different than the normal things we are concerned with here, in day-to-day life. That trust you build with the people you're deployed with is hard to replace. And you get used to not trusting a lot. And some, people I've come into contact with through the program and then other veterans have said that learning that when you're being attacked in jiu-jitsu and you tap and it stops, you rebuild trust. You learn how to trust again. And now you're learning to trust people that don't have that military background. They don't have that same story that you have with the people you did trust before. And you slowly build these bonds of trust in a different kind of community. And it helps with that reintegration. It helps get rid of or decrease the isolation that a lot of veterans feel when they come back. It's that trust building component. It's the part of the community component of jiu-jitsu is one of the, I talk about 5 facets of jiu-jitsu and there's a lot more. But I package it this way when I talk in groups, when I talk to people. It's fitness, human touch, structure, community, and achievement. And that trust piece touches a couple of different places, in that bucket or in those buckets, but the community part is a big part of trust. And I think that learning to tap, learning that you now have control again. You have control in this situation, that even if it's horrible and it sucks and a 280-pound brown belt is on your chest, you can make it stop when it's time. It's up to you. And you learn to trust those people again. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal for people trying to reintegrate back in a civilian life.
Do you feel like some of the more carnal aspects of jiu-jitsu, the fact that we can compete in fight with one another in a manner that simulates what real life confrontations are going to be like over and over and over again, in a sense start to rechannel and start to make the connections to what some of these sufferers from PTSD are going through, make them relate to what some of the scenarios of real-time war, like a firefight or some of the things would be like?
I've talked to a lot of veterans who talk about that they miss the fight to an extent. They miss that intensity. They miss that adrenaline rush. And Where are you going to find that outside of that scenario? Well, you find it in combat sports, and now you're finding it with people that start to feel that same human thing, that human component, that don't have a military background. That community. When I talked to Gino a couple months ago, after Jiu-Jitsu Times published his article, I connected with him. I said, man, you've got the data and the information that we want to have to be able to demonstrate that this program works. And one of the things we talked about was identity. And that's a component of it, I think, is that warrior ethos, that warrior piece. And that part of you is not just what you think you are, but what your body has experienced, the physiological components of war and of combat. And now you're duplicating them in a safe, trusting environment. So you're getting pieces of your identity that you had, you're getting them back. And now you're expressing them with a whole new group of people. And it's very important.
Which also in turn helps to bridge that gap between normal civilians and the soldiers returning. So now it helps them to assimilate into everyday life because civilians are everyday people. And again, I talk about these things because I don't understand what the effects of PTSD are. I've never been to war. I've never experienced any of those things, but I do know what I believe to be one of the greatest components of BJJ is the fact that we can recreate what the stresses of a real life fighting situation can be with over and over and over again, and learn how to deal with them, learn how to keep their mindset in the same. So I make the connection that BJJ and fighting in a firefight is similar. Granted, I've never been there, but I've heard from other people that the way the mind processes is, through the cognitive abilities and through the limbic system and whatnot are similar. So I imagine that it helps with that for PTSD sufferers.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, and I was going to kick it over to you, Doc, but TJ was talking about commenting on how you had the data. You had the numbers that sort of backed up what a lot of people sort of have come to know about jiu-jitsu. What was it like collecting that data and seeing it build up and building towards the end result, like once you had all this stuff to look at? What was the process like of learning more and building that paper?
Man, that's a great question. I mean, the first word that comes to mind is privilege. It really, truly, it was an incredible opportunity to be in a position to spend time with guys who have gone through this level of trauma and to watch how their participation in jiu-jitsu has changed their lives, legitimately changed their lives, right? I mean, some of the participants got off of Paxil, Zoloft, right? They were able to push that to the side. They were able to push the alcohol habit to the side. Others were able to retain employment, right, for longer than a couple of months. Others had relationships, their marriages, they were going down the tubes, and they were able to bring it back to life, be a better parent, be a better friend. So, accumulating the data itself, one of the biggest methodologies that I utilized was participant observation. When Kevin mentioned earlier, I was going around from school to school, I would literally some nights just sit on the corner of the mat and I would just observe everything. Everyone who was a registered participant in my study, I would follow what they were doing, what they were saying, how they were doing it. And then I would take that data, cross-reference it with interviews, focus groups that I would do with them, and in addition to some other types of research methodology. So one thing I want to touch on, though, to kind of buttress what TJ was saying earlier, and this definitely goes to the point of what you asked me, Kevin. So we have this concept called mental framing, right? So mental framing means the conditions and expectations that you foresee was something that you're going to have to do, right? When you are looking at a population that is combat seasoned, and folks who have dealt with the displacement of not being home, having to deal with austere environments, having to deal with life or death, fight or flight on a regular basis, it's an amazing thing because a lot of folks don't realize the wars that we have been fighting, right, the past 20 some odd years, right, they're not conventional in the sense that it is counterinsurgency operations. The nature of counterinsurgency, right, requires you, and General Petraeus said this best, it's winning the hearts and minds, all right, of folks. So when TJ said, you don't really know who to trust, that's a really big deal because when you're trained and conditioned to, hey, one day, yes, we want to give out and work with civil affairs to give out all these great things to the local Afghanis and Iraqis. But at the same time, the 13-year-old could come around the corner with an AK-47 and start shooting at us, or the wife could be strapped with a bunch of bombs. it is an incredibly stressful thing to say, okay, so I don't have a very clear picture of who the bad guy is and what I need to go do. It could be him, her, the child, I don't know. And when that is imprinted on your brain and then you come back to the States to try to re-assimilate, reacculturate, brother, you're talking about going against the grain of what trained you to keep your butt alive, right? I mean, and these are the things that hypervigilance, not being able to calm down in social settings, I mean, that's a big deal, right? And in addition to other symptomologies that are synonymous with PTSD. And that's why so many folks, and there has been a push to shift from PTSD just to PTS, post-traumatic stress, drop the disorder, because a lot of times the argument can be made that, listen, it's the most natural way for us to adapt to the environment that we were in. All these different characteristics are byproducts of the amount of stress that we went through. It's a natural, normal thing. The thing is that the majority of humans have no idea what that's like.
Yeah, it's amazing what stress will do to the human mind and our abilities and just the desire to survive, and how we'll mutate our thought processes and move on. You know, just in any traumatic instance, and we block things out, and like those traumas just don't go away. They stay inside of your brain, and they materialize in odd, horrible manners from time to time. It's an interesting way that you describe the two on why it's difficult for these guys to come back to assimilate, which is very, very tough for them.
I just very briefly, Gino, I just wanted to say, you just pissed me off pretty severely, and I don't think I'm going to be able to go forward without at least commenting on it. You talked about that you felt privileged and like lucky, and like, man, like so many people have it harder than me. Yesterday, I unironically struggled to open a bag of chips, and it pissed me off for like 2 hours. And today I'm sitting here with motherfucking Maverick and Jack Ryan giving me like the craziest stories ever. One's like flown into the stratosphere, the other's fighting drug dealers in Colombia. Like, just, and you got a good hair. Like, Gino, I'm sorry, I really am. Shut the fuck up.
He put his
really
fancy
sorry,
shirt
but
on.
Jesus Christ, man, other people got it for real. Just like, absolutely shut up.
That's it, bro. I'm done.
I'm running low on LaCroix, and I'm pissed about it. And you're.
Hey,
I'm sorry. I just
this morning with one specific intent, and that was to piss you the hell off. So I with my day. I'm good.
Oh man. I mean.
Let's talk a little bit about a few of the other things that Jiu-Jitsu recreates for the soldier's mind. I remember when I interviewed you before, we talked about the hierarchy of the belt system as it imitates the same parameters of what a military life is like. Because I know a lot of my friends that are ex-military guys that come home, and they have a longing for that structure. They have a longing for that hierarchy of events. You don't just arbitrarily succumb or follow someone else's lead unless they have rank over you. And when we come back into jiu-jitsu, like there seems to obviously the belt ranking system kind of recreates that. Do you feel like that's relevant? TJ, what do you think about that?
I think that it's relatable. And that's a big component of it.
Right.
You're used to structure in the military where you're given a lot of stuff. You know when to use it. You know when you're going to be told when to do certain things and how to do certain things. There is a rank structure that you wear a uniform, and that becomes a very normal part of your life. And you leave the military, and all of that is gone. And now you have to figure out how to do things without that structure, without that support network. And it sounds like it shouldn't be a big deal, but when you're already very burdened with a lot of stuff, every chunk of control that you lose matters. And that familiarity with that, it starts to establish a little bit of a sense of control again, because you get it. You know who the instructor is. You understand where you are at the bottom is a white belt. You're the new guy. You know how to be the new guy because you were the new guy before. And, it was rough when you were the new guy. And so you're used to that, I think that's a very relatable component. So when guys get into, or men and women both, when they start jiu-jitsu, that component feels familiar. And as they practice it more and more, it returns a sense of control to their lives.
Yeah, I think a lot of times too, when I think about, you know, soldiers return back, particularly soldiers that were in conflict, or soldiers that were in war times, you know, when they come back to America, or they come back to the States and they have to go get a job at some, you know, menial position. They've got some manager that's never been to war before. Like, they're accustomed to the rule of the strong. Like, they followed orders from guys that kept them alive. And the reason why they followed those orders is because that dude has been out there going through the shit and understands how to stay alive. Then when they come back to the States, you know, they try to get a job, and like, they've got some kid, you know, some dude that's never done anything in his life that's out there telling them how they're supposed to restock groceries. And there's that disconnect because they haven't really been through the same things that this person has been through. What do you think about that, Gino?
No, I mean, Kevin, you nailed it, right? I mean, leadership. Yeah. There is such a huge disconnect between the quality of leadership that these guys and gals have been exposed to, right? When they're outside of the wire and they come back to the States. Listen, man, you walk into a jiu-jitsu academy, a legitimate one, that black belt instructor, like, that's not someone that anyone walking in that door is going to easily overturn. You didn't earn that rank because you paid money for it. It just doesn't exist in jiu-jitsu culture. But so knowing that you're dealing with someone who has been there, done that, and they continuously do it, and they're leading by example every single night, because they're not just telling you what to do, they're rolling with you as well, right? So it's a constant validation that, dude, I have a long way to go, right? I have a lot still to learn. And even when you start kind of getting that chip on your shoulder, you're like, I'm getting my games, it's getting pretty slick. And they lock your ass up. It's like, okay, so we're gonna bring it back down, right? Back down to ground level. So we're in a normal civilian sense, you don't have that. You don't have that respect level, because that sort of leadership, it generates organic respect. And in a corporate setting, in social settings, you don't have that, right? And so you have the fake tough guys who feel like they demand respect. You've got interactions with folks who are passive aggressive, which is a really much more highly occurring thing these days because of some of the emotional issues going on and psychological issues. But it matters. Leadership is a very, very big deal in the military, and as well as, of course, in jiu-jitsu. I mean, who it is you train under, that matters. That lineage, that matters.
Yeah, and I imagine when, you know, again, when you go through the traumas of what war is like, and when you fought, and again, I by no means like to try to make the correlations like I can understand what it's like to be at a war, because I can't. I want to continue to say that because I can't, because I think it's important that I make that correlation. But I've done some shit. You know, I've worked in bars. I've been in real life confrontations. I've been in, you know, plenty of jiu-jitsu competitions and real life fights, boxing matches and MMA matches and all those other things that I've been involved in. And what I've known is that when you start to go through that ringer, your bullshit detector is very high. Like, you know, when you've got some fake dude in your face that's trying to look like you're tough, it's very difficult to respect them unless they know where you're coming from. And I imagine it's even harder for these military guys to come back and be able to walk that line. And again, when we talk about assimilation, recreating those bonds through the power of jiu-jitsu helps these soldiers to get back to the idea of saying, okay, cool, maybe Tommy ain't the toughest guy in the world, maybe he's never killed somebody before, maybe he's never been in a firefight, but he's my boss, so I have to take a deep breath and I have to kind of realize that this is the world that I'm back in now, and I have to start to play by those rules.
Well, I think, you know, with jiu-jitsu, with that struggle that we have on the mats, we talked a lot about hypervigilance already, PTSD, the physiological components, but, you know, your fight or flight system, when you're hypervigilant, it's on all the time. You have all these stressors, and when you have an outlet that uses the fight or flight system the way it's supposed to be, your brain is more ready to act in a more, we'll call it normal. I don't like to use that word, but I can't think of a better one right now, or maybe a less aroused type of environment. Your normal faculties are now there, ready to operate with the rest of society, because you are utilizing, and it's the same reason people say you should work out when you have anxiety. It's that same component. Only now with someone who's hypervigilant, it's that much more important, because you have to use that system. Otherwise, it just produces a bunch of crap that is terribly damaging for your physiology. It's bad, and you get to use it in jiu-jitsu, and it better prepares you to deal with the regular strain of, you know, the 9-to-5 life that you haven't really dealt with or haven't had to deal with, but now you do.
Yeah, I make the correlation a lot thinking about that when I talk about, like, trained fighters. Like when I go out and some dude gets in my face and starts yelling because some drunk dumb shit like that, like it takes so much for me to care enough to react to that person simply because, like, I do this all day long. I don't care. I have nothing to prove this person because I've already proved it over and over and over again. So 9 times out of 10, I just look at the guy and say, hey, man, whatever. You're right. I'm an asshole. I apologize. Please just go on about your day. So I imagine that a lot of times, with suffer some PTSD, you get them in. It's almost like a kid. You're like what you do in an adolescent. You run them to get it out of their system. So when they come home, they're not tired anymore. So do you think that the idea of recreating these flight or fight notions in the brain through the process of rolling helps to get it out of their system into where now they can also, get back to their normal lives?
100%. I mean, but it's not just for veterans. It's for every human being who has ever experienced trauma, which is every human being.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's dealing with something. And I think sometimes veterans don't understand or they don't know who they can trust. They don't understand maybe that their peers in the civilian world have a story too. When you're on the mats and you earn something with those people on the mats, their stories gain a legitimacy with you that it wouldn't have otherwise had. And now you know that even if you're talking to this person, they may not exactly understand what you did as a veteran or the stressors you're coping with. You're now learning to trust them to hear your story. And you know that even if they don't get it, they're there to support you. And that wasn't present before. That wasn't present before jiu-jitsu. That wasn't a community you were a part of.
When I think about trauma, When I think about trauma, I think about the overwhelming philosophy or understanding of people that have experienced that trauma. They always feel like no one else is going to get it. No one else understands what they've gone through because they're the only person in the world that's experienced this trauma. So they suppress it. I'm not going to explain it to you because you just wouldn't get it anyway. So like the idea of going out there and working through these things, like it means a lot to me. Coming from someone that's had a significant amount of trauma coming up in my earlier days, jiu-jitsu has been my salvation through lots and lots of things, man.
Kevin, what's amazing what you just said is that jiu-jitsu is my salvation. I can't tell you how many folks who participated in the study shared the exact same sentiment.
Yeah.
That it literally saved their life. And it's amazing because going back to TJ raised a really important point about the physiological side, right? I mean, when we think about what goes into fight or flight, we have this thing called the HPA Axis, right? It's hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands. It controls our stress response system. So when shit's hitting the fan, right, and we're dumping epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, all kinds of stuff to be able to perform the way that we need to, fighting or running away, when that is constantly on go, and it never stops, there are fMRI studies that show atrophy, right, within those particular organs. So you are legitimately, it's just like working out. They always say the most important part of working out is your downtime, resting. Make sure you're resting and make sure you get the right nutrition. Well, when you're exercising, you're constantly going, and that stress response cycle, there is burnout. Burnout's a very real thing. And if your body suspends its ability to produce these neurohormones, there are some very real consequences. So being able to associate not just the fight or flight that may be associated with loss or trauma, but also with the reward system, right? Being able to kick in the serotonin and the dopamine, that is super important. And to TJ's point earlier, that's what training does. We have the ability to tap, reset. All right, let me get the move this time, right? So within that span of a 5-minute round, a 10-minute round of rolling, whatever it is, you have the highs and the lows, but they're offsetting one another, right? So that's a really important part from the physiological standpoint that isn't always necessarily correlated to what they experience when they think about their trauma.
I want to hit on something real fast, sorry, because this is something we don't talk about enough in our society, especially. It's human touch. We don't experience it enough, and it's important. And we get on the mats, even though you're trying to, kill each other. There is that human touch. There's neurotransmitters and chemicals that are occurring that are the same kind that when you touch your kid's face is happening right then in that same moment. That creates bonds, and it creates a positive reward system. That's part of why jiu-jitsu is so addicting, that touch, and it matters. And you can't hug people in society the way that, you know, casual touch is a lot of times frowned on or made fun of in everyday society. Well, it's not in the gym. It's not on those mats. And that's a component that's kind of overlooked that adds exactly right into what Gino's talking about in terms of that physiology and those bonds that we build. It's really, really important. It's a huge part of it. And I think that's why you can put people in all kinds of recreational activities that are good for them, like CrossFit or other sports that they benefit from. But that's one of the things that makes jiu-jitsu unique. It's touch.
And it's such a good point, TJ, too, man. And listen, for whoever's tuning in, and you guys as well, man, there's a book, and TJ, I know you know this book, On Killing by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. It's an incredible text, and I would encourage anyone to read it. But the whole point is, as human beings, when you're thinking about from a military combative perspective, when you are training and conditioning yourself, right, to go and take the life of another human being, your own species, right, because of political reasons, because of the duality between right versus wrong and who's right and how do you justify that, which can get very convoluted. We have seen that a lot with vets who have come back, not just the recent wars, but also the Vietnam War as well. There's a lot of questioning, right? And so when you go through the process of becoming inherently defensive and protecting your body, and now you're put into an environment where I'm literally, my chest is on top of yours, right? My carotid artery is right next to yours. My private area, where I'm in guard, like I'm locking it. They seem completely counterintuitive because in a defensive situation, you want space, right? You want that distance so you feel secure. We break those barriers down in jiu-jitsu 100%. And that has incredible value.
Well, I think that you want space. And I feel like the magical thing about jiu-jitsu is that it teaches you how to safely and effectively make space in unwanted close encounters, like your mount escapes. It's all about like hipping out, pushing the leg, isolating. You're given a roadmap to success instead of wandering around in the dark, because you could get lucky and flail your way out of basically anything. Adrenaline kicks in and you're suddenly Superman for a little bit. But the ability to know what you're doing is it's incredible. And the only real combative situation I ever had, if you've looked at me for audio only listeners, I'm sorry, but looking at me on the screen, I'm not a fighter. Like it's weird that I even started doing jiu-jitsu, but I was a cross country runner in high school. And there was this guy on the football team that someone dared him to shove me in the trunk of his car and drive away. So I was just chilling after practice, and someone came up to me and sort of nonchalantly goes, "Hey, this guy's going to try and kidnap you." And I'm like, "Huh?" And then he just started charging toward me, and I tried to run away. And he's a really big, strong guy. I'm a malnourished varsity cross-country runner.
Tim, just on a side note, I'll totally kick that guy's ass for you if you want me to.
Oh, no, that's
I was waiting for it, dude.
No, but and so he started dragging me across the ground, and I'm like trying to grab the grass to like stop him, and he's like, I just have no idea what to do. Luckily, my cross-country coach just arrived, and he was a purple belt at the time. Shout out to Ed, who he actually gave me my blue belt sometime after that. He just jumps on the kid's back, sinks in the choke, and gets a body triangle and like brings him to the ground. His head's purple, and he almost passes out. Someone is slapping him awake, and I'm like, "Ed, you saved me!" And he grabbed me by my shoulders and said, "Tell me he was 18. I can't go to jail." But I can always, if I really try hard enough, put myself back into that absolute unknowing state, just the fear and the terror of just not knowing how to defend myself. And now I like, as a sort of therapy, I go through that situation and go, okay, well, when he was there, I could have like done a leg sweep. I could have like technical stand up to do something and run away. Yeah, it is magical. And then in that way, it was my salvation. Also, it helps that it is the number one way I'm able to socialize with people, and I feel like that for a lot of people, that's the same way. TJ, you were talking about touch, and Gino, you were talking about the different ways that jiu-jitsu brings people and breaks down barriers. we are currently in a very bad time for jiu-jitsu, where most of the country has still made it had a moratorium on gyms opening up. People are doing it in secret, obviously, but there's a lack of that touch, the physical component. I would love to hear from both of you how you see that having ramifications going forward for the people that rely on jiu-jitsu as that sort of therapy, as that sort of release. Gino, if you could start, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So is it going to change? I mean, yeah, man, look at what we've all have been going through, right? Do I think that there's light at the end of the tunnel? Absolutely. I think it's really, this entire time has challenged folks to get creative with their training, right? I mean, I know so many jiu-jitsu instructors who are doing Zoom classes, right? They're doing the online stuff. You're still missing that touch component. But it's amazing. And I'll tell you, actually, TJ and I are both in this. We're in a coaching program with Dr. Roddy Ferguson. And it's friend of
the show.
Now, listen here now. I walked into the gym cold one day.
450.
I front squatted 495.
Cold off the street.
John Jones does not touch Daniel Cormier in his prime.
we all love Roddy Ferguson.
Shout out, he is one of my favorite guests of all time. I love him.
But doing dummy training, right? That's a big thing right now. Is it the same as far as the touch component and real-time feedback? No, of course not. But as far as being able to drill and have the confidence to know that, okay, I'm still going through the movements, I'm still putting myself in a training environment. And if you're lucky enough to be able to do the Zoom thing, right, that's great. Do I think that it's something that, as far as the perpetual nature of what we're going through, how that is going to play out, do I think we probably still have another 4 to 6 months to go? I do. At the end of that, do I think we're going to be A-okay and back to normal? Absolutely.
TJ.
There's been pandemics before, right? I mean, humankind has never stopped. So it sucks right now, but it's not always going to suck. It's going to change. We just have to get through a while, and it's not always going to be fun. And there's going to be times when we all suffer. This is kind of an interesting side piece, because the head of our affiliation up here, Ishmael Bentley, at M30 Martial Arts in Minnesota, he's a Pedro Sauer affiliate, and he has put together a briefing that has been they're attempting to circulate it up to the governor's office to be able to see the plan that he's put together. He just put a YouTube out on the thing on it, and it's built in stages where, the first 2 weeks you do it like this, then you do it like this, where there's more and more contact allowed all the way through. But one of the reasons that I think that he talks about why he did it is because you can't expect people that do this sport, that want that touch, that are used to that activity, to not do it. They're going to do it. So, if you provide a way for them to do it with milestones and ways to look forward to it happening, to getting to do it, you lessen the likelihood that irresponsible behavior or something unsafe is going to occur. So he said part of the argument for having this plan and getting it pushed so that the policymakers can see it is to help ensure that people will, act by it. Because if you don't, and you don't offer them anything, they're gonna find a way.
Yeah.
And in an environment like this, it's hard to know. That's a little bit of an unpredictable threat. I mean, there's a lot we know about the virus. There's a lot we don't, and we don't know where it's going to go. But I think everybody wishes they could predict that. And the more people you have kind of operating on their own with lack of guidance, that's a problem. If you create some guidance and you create a plan for people to follow, that they can look forward to, that they can expect, that might be a better path forward than, you lump jiu-jitsu is an interesting thing. You lump them in with gyms. Well, you open a gym. Okay, gyms are open. Does that mean you can do jiu-jitsu? You still have a whole other bunch of constraints to deal with. Mm-hmm. So it is a tough question. I echo what Gino said. We got months to deal with in different parts of the country, different things. And that's a challenge that we Defy is dealing with, because we have athletes, veterans that we're sponsoring and that we want to start, and we had to stop because gyms are closed. So now part of what I'm doing is managing, okay, which gyms are open and we can start students at again, and which ones can't we? So I'm juggling all that. That's a real challenge.
Yeah. One thing that's really interesting, TJ, that you say, man, and it really resonates. So the idea, all of us know, a huge part of the training process in jiu-jitsu is becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? And being able to garner patience, right? How important is that when we're rolling and we're working on certain things, to find that opening? And we may have to go through a bit of a suck fest to get there, right? But when we get there, we're good, right? So jiu-jitsu is an incredible catalyst for that. And so I think this time especially has given folks the ability to kind of work on the mental side, right? And really put some of the principles that are learned on the mat to be able to apply it to different facets of their life. Now that's much more on the philosophical side of things, right? But jiu-jitsu, it's chess, right? And so being able to know the right moves, the right pieces, being able to understand and be very methodical with your decision-making ability and how you manage your life and your lifestyle when we're going through a stressful period like this, that is a pandemic, I think has a lot of inherent qualities as well. Do I think that's a different level of understanding and diving into it than someone just walking into an academy and being a white belt for a month or two? Yeah, absolutely, man. But I think those principles, they resonate.
Well, and I had a friend who's a therapist, and one of the things he used to say is, we have an expectation today that we're always supposed to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're always supposed to feel good. And we have this reliance on a lot of meds with psychiatric treatment. But his thinking was that those were more of a symptom check and not a resolution piece. Mm-hmm. Because you can't expect you're always going to feel okay. You have to learn how to be okay not being okay. That is jiu-jitsu. We've heard that phrase so many times. It's comfortable without being comfortable, or comfortable while you're uncomfortable. And that totally applies right now. And I thought that to myself, man, this is going to suck.
Yeah.
But and you know what else? I learned something in the military. Stuff sucks sometimes, and you can get through it. And jiu-jitsu teaches that same lesson.
Well, Kev, you're living in a state where jiu-jitsu is being re-implemented. How are things going for you and the guys down there?
So, I mean, again, depends on where you're training at and which gym wants to follow the rules. And you got to remember, this is Florida. We're in the Wild West. We can do whatever the hell we want to do. No, nothing's really going to be enforced out here. This is like, the last bastion of the Civil War, the real South down here, man. We do what we want. But what I've encountered in particularly my gym that I train at, that I coach at, Matt Arroyo's gym, is we've been doing socially distanced classes, which aren't great. To be honest with you, it's boring. It's not cool. It's not real jiu-jitsu. But what it is it's still an opportunity for these guys that want to go for the community of what jiu-jitsu holds for them to show up to a gym at 6 o'clock, like they're scheduled to go to every week, to be a part of the camaraderie that's involved with that. And when I'm teaching my classes now, we do very philosophical talks, and sometimes I just sit up there and tell stories and laugh and just get these guys talking and enjoying each other while we go through the motions of whatever we're stuck with at this time. Because, the idea in my mind, and I always say this a lot, jiu-jitsu is almost secondary to learning jiu-jitsu. Right. What you really learn from jiu-jitsu are these abilities to conquer things, to become a part of a community, and to find ways to get through your daily struggles. And when you come in the room, you have to figure out a way to do that. You have to figure out a way to connect to these people, figure out a way to make them forget about whatever hell else is going on their day. And if it means Coach Kevin sits at the front of the desk or sits up at the front of the room and tells jokes for 45 minutes and does a little stretching and pretends like I showed you an arm bar, then, hey, that's what you do to get these guys through that, to connect to them, to get them through these tough times, man.
I think the one thing that really impresses me about some pieces of the jiu-jitsu community is, this is a time where we're dealing with a lot of adversity. Mm-hmm. And not just in jiu-jitsu, but when people adapt, that to me is inspiring. And it's easy in a way to go and just kind of go rogue. And I can't, easy is not the right term. I mean, it's there's considerations with all that, but I'm really inspired when I see people step up to the adversity and look at the constraints on them and say, this is how we're going to make it work. That impresses me. And even when it's not perfect and it's not as good as I wish it could be, there's a component of pride and excitement for me when I see people stand up like that. Say, this is what we're going to do because this is the best we can do with it. We're going to make this work for now. It's going to get better later. That's inspiring to me. That helps me get through the rough stuff.
It's really interesting too, TJ, when you say that, like, so resiliency, right? The incredible thing about jiu-jitsu, right? And progressing and going on and sticking with it. I have never met an upper belt that is not inherently just resilient, because listen, you get tapped, so what? No big deal. Go back, do better next time, right? You fail at something in life, okay, go back, do it again. What did you learn? Do it again, over and over and over again. So the ability to apply the resiliency component, and look, the military has, especially the Army, they have dropped a lot of coin on trying to ramp up resiliency training, right? And being able to have, there's a program that they have called Comprehensive Soldier Fitness. TJ, I think you and I, we had to talk about that when you and I touched base a couple months ago, but they have spent millions upon millions of dollars trying to understand the art and science that is building resiliency. And three fundamental things that come along with it. Typically, it's something that has to be a combination of physical, mental, and social. You have to feed all three pillars in order to build a comprehensive sense of resiliency. And so when you think of jiu-jitsu, do we have the physical? Do we have the mental? And do we have the social? Absolutely, we do, right? Now, what matters with all three? The consistency factor. When you stick with it, right? Because you continuously, every training session is adversity, reward, adversity, reward, adversity, reward, right? And so the ability to continuously bounce in between those domains to make ourselves tougher, to make ourselves have more grit. That's not stuff that you learn in a textbook. That stuff's forged. Like there's no easy way of creating a resilient outlook and a resilient approach. Just like the same thing with having good habits or having excellence in your life. That stuff, it's forged, and it takes time to forge it.
So I have one more question for you guys before we get going here, because I gotta go teach a class at 6 and I gotta move around. Kev, you got anything else? You got anything we'll talk about before?
No, take it away, man.
So obviously we've talked about what you guys offer, and We Defy organization it's one of my favorites. Like I want anything I can do to help support this cause. I want to offer whatever limited, range of spectrum that I have to reach to whatever community follows me. I want to help you guys to do that, because I really believe
hard pause on that. I'll probably edit this out. Kev, you're not supposed to do that. Sorry, TJ and Gino. It's weird, but this podcast is actually really anti-veteran, So like, I don't know if that I should have brought that up at the top. We'll edit that out. Don't worry about it. It's
you pissed me off, Kevin.
I knew it's going to be a little thing. It's just
that's all.
So the point I'm trying to say is we've heard a lot of great discussions today. We heard a lot of things about what We Defy does and what your research is brought to the table. But between the two of you, obviously we're not doing enough. Obviously you guys are still struggling to get scholarships for your soldiers that come home, and obviously, Gino, there's the full range of what the Veterans Association has to offer to sufferers of PTSD along this accord is nowhere near sufficient. Where do we go from here? What are some things that, TJ, you think we need to do, and what does your organization need to do? And from the medical terms, what do you feel like we need to do next to be able to get the infrastructure and the funding to be able to do that from the medical side? We'll start with TJ first.
I think, for us, we are a small nonprofit that has seen incredible exposure and growth. And that's a fantastic problem to have. Most of the fundraising we did early on was a grassroots thing. And as we get bigger and as our reach gets bigger, as we formalize, organizationally, we're going to have to start looking to bigger funding sources like grants and maybe government VA funding, things like that, and bringing people into our organization that have access to those types of things, that know how to do that, so that when we start asking, we know how to ask the right people in the right way. And it takes a while for an organization to get that kind of growth. We don't have a problem finding gyms that want to support us. We don't find a problem or have a problem finding veterans that need our help. What we need is funds. And people can donate online on our website at wedefyfoundation.org. There's a donate now button there. You can give donations for gear. We just had a new set of gis drop on pre-order, and there's a couple styles that are only on pre-order till June 6th, and then that's it. We have a new rash guard. That's the Gadsden flag, if you know what that is. It's pretty steeped in American history. All those avenues go towards helping us put our guys and gals on the mats. But another thing right now that's, I think, important to recognize is small businesses are hurting right now. And we're not just putting veterans on the mats. We're supporting small businesses that are maybe not getting the big checks, or whatever they were, assistance, things like that. Mom and pop stores, different places like that. So the support that we provide, our veterans are the most important part. But organic to that is the jiu-jitsu community that's hurting right now. And as schools open up and we're able to place more and more of that's a good thing that's going to continue to happen. That we can reach out and touch and make a difference as an organization, not just for veterans right now, but for a lot more people than that are hurting at the moment. Future-wise, I think, this problem ain't going away. It's just getting awareness out and, using your support, Kevin. I mean, we've had a couple collaborations. It's amazing, to see the way that people want to help us get the message out, get veterans on the mats. And we just have to keep pushing that way. And, getting the rash guards, on the mats in competition. So letting people see and letting people hear what we do. And the last thing I want to say, and it's taking this a little bit off direction, but our motto is prove them wrong. And I think when I think about what that means, there's guys that the VA says, or maybe a therapist or doctor says, you're never going to walk again. You're never going to go do this again. There's so many limitations are put on veterans with disabilities. But that tagline, prove them wrong, we use it to help inspire people to not listen and to go out and do something that maybe other people think you wouldn't be able to do. But there's another part to that where we all have a naysayer in our own heads, a voice that says, I can't do that. I shouldn't compete. I'm going to lose. It's scary. We all have negative self-talk. That's the voice to prove wrong. And that's something that jiu-jitsu can bring to everybody. And that's why it works for veterans.
Awesome, man. That's really well said, man. I tell you 100%. Like, I've had a few people that come up to me that wear We Defy shirts that say, hey, man, I read that article. I'm a veteran. I really appreciate what you do. And like, shit like that, even if it's 2-3 people, shit like that really means something to me, man. It really does. Like,
that support is awesome. It's incredible.
Cool, man. To be able to see it firsthand, it makes it real for me.
Yeah,
so, amazing. Gino, what do you think, man? What are some of the things we can do from the medical perspective to gain more awareness and maybe bring this into the forefront instead of just some, off the cuff research that you did to a real case study that could get more results and get more things done?
Yeah, so it's something that I've been working on pretty diligently for about the past year and a half. A lot of folks don't realize the VA is the second most well-funded government entity outside of the DoD in this country, right? There are an incredible amount of dollars that go into the VA. And on the onset, the government can make the argument that, hey, we're taking care of our veterans, we're pumping dollars into the VA, but we have seen that the methodologies do not work, especially from a behavioral perspective and how it is that we're addressing these sorts of issues. So numbers talk, right? So the idea, what's the next step for this research? We have to have a large study that is nationwide. I had 20 participants in my study, and that's nothing, right? Do I think that's that small sample represents a lot of variety of what is out there? Sure. But listen, there's so many, we need thousands of participants to really get some solid data so we can then take that to DC and be able to get the right funding. Because look, what my goal for at the end of all this is to have TRICARE pay, right, for the training for all of these guys and gals. There's no reason why they shouldn't. TRICARE is the insurance arm of the military, right, for health insurance and healthcare. When you look at, Blue Cross Blue Shield or other health insurance companies out there, they have programs set up where they will pay for a gym membership. If you can prove that it's something that is contributing to your health and well-being that will offset costs for things that you may get down the line, they'll happily fork that bill. So why wouldn't we do the same thing? Whether it's jiu-jitsu or some other sort of quote unquote play therapy, why wouldn't we do that? Right? It makes sense to do so. We just have to have the numbers and mass quantity to be able to justify and make the argument.
Awesome, man. That's cool, man. That's hopefully we can get to a point to where we get these guys the help they need, because it angers me to no end to see guys continue to suffer and know what I know about jiu-jitsu and how it can help, and if it's at least give them an option to do that,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have right before we're wrapping up here, I just wanted to, everyone should or probably does know someone tied to the military in some way, some more than others. My little brother Sean, he's one of those kids. He was told at every level of education that, you're dumb, you're not good enough, you're stupid, and it sucked having to see that. He gets to college, thinks it's not for him, decides to join the Marine Corps. Cut to a little over 2 years later. Now he's a corporal. He's a crew chief down in Beaufort, and he's found everything that he needed in life once he joined up. He's never been happier. He is appreciated, and that matters. These are people that need those things. They're people that go in looking for something that's missing, and they give a lot. They give just about everything. They sign away a certain period of their life that could be that could lead them into the most dangerous situations you can see. Mm-hmm. So to have both of you guys on to bring some awareness to that issue, personally, it means a lot for me. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry.
He's still a bit messed up about reliving the beatdown he got from the football player. And
no. We had
to delve deep into that one, man.
I was more. It's crazy. I'm more horrified that back then I was 120 pounds, and I'm like, that's crazy to think about. So shout out to crew chief Sean Bradley. I don't know if you watch all of these, but we're mentioning you here at the end. This has been a very powerful episode, guys. Thank you so much for coming on. Right here at the end, you talked a lot, but if there's anything else you wanted to plug at the end, now's the time to do that. Gino, you want to go first?
Yeah, man. I would just say that the biggest thing is awareness, right? Being able to have exposure. When most people think of jiu-jitsu in society, right, they think MMA, UFC, fighting, self-defense, without really understanding the deeper things that are at play, right? The relationships, the skill sets, the knowledge, the confidence. There's so much that goes into that is outside of the context of quote unquote fighting. I mean, Kevin, look, man, you've been in the combative arts for pretty much your whole life, man. You've competed at the highest of levels. Do you ever foresee a time in your life, in the course of the years you have left, to where you would never recognize or identify as a fighter?
No, it's a part of me. It's who I am.
Yeah, it's exactly right, brother. It's a part. It's ingrained into the fabric of who you are. The warrior ethos, the warrior identity. You don't just go into war and then come back and like, okay, I'm a civilian now. It doesn't work that way, man. That's not how identity, the tentacles of association, it is a culmination, and you never lose that. It can change. It can morph into something else. And jiu-jitsu is that tool, is that vehicle that allows you to still maintain that warrior ethos, that warrior identity, and social collectivity with folks that you're bonded through, right? With blood, sweat, and tears, very similar to what it is that is experienced when you're deployed out.
Okay, I meant like Instagram or Twitter, but that was really cool and very eloquent, so that's fine.
He's got a problem with you, man.
It's just that you're looking too good for these times, man. Like I got this beard. I wear a hat because my hair looks like shit.
That's not the guy that beats you up, Kev. You know what I mean? It's not the same dude.
All right. And this is the last time I open up on the show, Kevin. That's what you're telling me. TJ, anything the viewers can go to, like links that you wanted to plug?
Just have to do what Gino just did, do I? Like I can.
No, you're good. You're good. Just give us a website and we can move on. I got shit to do, man. I don't know if Gino missed the point. I was trying to wrap things up.
Really? I already said all the things. Like I don't know.
Yeah, no. So just we'll include links to the We Defy Foundation and where you can read more of Gino's work in the description down below. But once again, thank you both for coming on. We hope to have you on again soon, hopefully when we're all more full of jiu-jitsu and I'm a little less disheveled looking, so Gino doesn't intimidate me as much. I have been your host, Kevin Bradley, joined as always by my co-host, Kevin Gallagher. Stay safe, love one another, give some air fives and long distance hugs if need be. We're missing the feeling of physical contact, but just know that we're coming towards the end of this. You know, I say that a lot, but you know, this time I mean it for real this time. And shout out to all those that have served. Thank you very much for your service, and those that are continuing to give all they have for the greatest country in the world. We will not forget you. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.